Hey, students, I hope that you've enjoyed reading in your textbook this week, Chapter 3 on ethics, social responsibility, and sustainability as it relates to international management. These topics are really interesting. It gives you a lot to think about, right? I have someone here that I'm about to talk to that I'd like to introduce you to. Her name is Olivia. Olivia and I worked together at Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions. Olivia is originally from Canada, but she has been working for quite a while for a portion of the year in Punta Arenas, Chile, and she's also spent some time working in Argentina and Brazil. So Olivia, she brings a lot of unique ways of looking at things with being from Canada and then working at those different places. We're gonna talk about her experience, the places that she's worked at, what she's learned, and kind of that cultural behavior. But then we're also going to actually dive into some of the ethics and social responsibility things that she sees, in her role that we deal with down in Chile. So I hope you all enjoy this. Yeah, let's meet Olivia. Hey, Olivia, how are you doing today?
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's great having you here. To talk to my students about where you're from and kind of some of the things that we're reading about in class. So yeah, I was gonna see if you could kind of like tell us about yourself. Just give us a overview of who you are, where you're from, what you do, all of that.
I'm from Canada, but I've spent the majority of my adult life living and working in South America. I've lived and worked in both Argentina, Chile, and Brazil. So I feel like my perspective and outlook on things is no longer just Canadian, but also a mixture of Latin views on the world. And I'm currently working with Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions, and for them, I'm their guest services manager in Chile and spending half the year in Canada and half the year in Chile.
Okay, great. And where are you at right now?
Right now, I am in Canada. I'm from an area called the Kootenays. It's in British Columbia, and it's a small town called Kimberley. It's a resort town that does bring in some foreign workers to work here as well.
Oh, cool. Um, yeah, so I didn't know that you had actually spent time working in Argentina and Brazil as well. So that's bonus points, I guess. We got multiple countries to talk about. So yeah, what was your experience with working in each of those, three different countries, and then any of your work experience in Canada?
Interestingly enough, before I traveled to all of these different countries, I thought that their mindsets and the culture would be the same, considering that it's all Latin. It's very different between those three countries, not only with their culture, but with their outlook on life and approach to the workforce. I found in Argentina, they were very creative with what they did for a living. Creativity came in all aspects of life, in the design, in their work, in the way that they lived. And then Chile, which is right next door to Argentina, is so different, given that they've always had quite a conservative or military government. So their mindset is much more structured and they follow suit a lot better and do not have much room for creativity. So it's interesting to see those two outlooks in Latin America and then comparing that with what I knew in Canada.
Okay. And what about Brazil? You said you spent some time working in Brazil. How does that
Sometime in,
compare?
yeah, Brazil is very different in that there's not one skin color, so there are no um, prejudices based upon how you look. They had slavery in Brazil into the 90s. So there's lots of African descent, European, Latin American, and then they're the only country in South America that speaks Portuguese. So they're a bit of an island on the continent with themselves there.
Okay.
Mhm.
Um, so I know being a Canadian, right? Working in these other countries, what were some of the like differences that you had to learn? From going, North American to the countries on the southern tip of South America.
I think you start to question what you know is being right and what you think you know is right. We're told what social etiquettes are in the workplace in North America, and then you go somewhere else and see that that is actually seen as a negative rather than an accepted norm. For example, in Canada, people like us to communicate very directly.
Hmm.
Um, I would say that we like to see our superiors on the same level as us, both um, respectfully and in and outside the work. No one's better than anyone else. Whereas in Chile, that work structure is quite a bit different. There's more of a pyramid structure. And if you're near the top of the pyramid, there are things you cannot say or do to people below so that that structure is not interrupted both inside the workplace and outside the workplace. So you see social status coming into play in quite a bit of the workforce in Chile. So that was a big thing that I had to get used to. And then in Chile, everything's quite around the bush. You're not supposed to say things directly because that will come across as being very upfront and rude.
Yeah.
So it was something I had to learn and learn to interpret in other people as well. It was also a frustration for me because I was wondering why people just can't tell me how it is straight up. If it's a no, why not just say it's not possible rather than give me a yes, which is what I would want to hear, and then not follow through with that. So there were a lot of challenges going to another country and questioning if my values were then the right ones when I'm surrounded by a bunch of people who do things quite a bit differently than I thought we should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. I know I've spent a little bit of time in Chile, not anywhere as close to as much time as you have. And having those conversations with people where things are around the bush without being direct as someone from the US is difficult for me, right? Um, so
Another thing that comes up in Chile when we're working there is the managerial structure. I
mm,
don't see anybody in our operation as being more important or less important than somebody else. I don't see that the manager or the owner should sit there and do nothing and just tell the first year staff what to do, and expect those first year staff to work harder either. Whereas North America style is usually quite a bit the opposite. Whereas if you're a manager, you're working harder and longer hours than you are if you're a first year staff member.
yeah,
Yeah, it's almost reversed the two structures in the office.
yeah. So in North America, a lot of times you have the supervisor working alongside uh, with the staff or the workers, right? But then you're saying in Chile that the managers are more directive and sit back, and more, I would say, authoritative. Is that a good way to describe it in your opinion?
Definitely, very much so authoritative. They don't want their employees to give them advice, even though the
Hmm.
employees are the one that's seeing the in and out of the operation. That would be them stepping out of line. Whereas here in North America, I think the managers or supervisors appreciate that feedback from their staff on the ground.
Yeah. Okay. And how does that compare with Argentina?
Argentinians are quite a bit more free. They don't like being told what to do. And that's because their economy's always been boom and bust. So when they're going through a bust, they all need to be creative and figure out a way to make a living. They can't rely on their
Mm.
government as Chile could in the past. Chile's economy has just continually grown over the years, whereas Argentina in the 40s was doing great, and then it totally crashed, and then it doing great, and then it totally crashed. Now inflation is out the roof again. So I feel like most people there are always looking for ways to reinvent themselves creatively. They've also had a dictatorship for the last quite a few years, and they're not bringing in imports from other countries, or they have like a 60% tax put on them. So it gives a lot of opportunity for people to be creative.
Okay.
For example, I had some friends there who had a company making puffy jackets, and everything was made in Argentina, but they couldn't get the zippers that were coming from China. So then they just
Okay.
reinvented themselves to make something new. So the Argentines are quite a bit different in that there's not larger scale. I mean, there are larger scale companies, but lots of people end up working for themselves and finding creative outlets to make a
Okay.
living. Mhm.
Gotcha. Um, Awesome. Yeah, no, that kind of you kind of touched in a topic we touched on last week, which is about kind of the government interference, right, with business and how different rules and regulations or political outlooks can affect leaders working uh, internationally, right?
For
Um,
sure.
so one thing you kind of mentioned a minute ago when you were talking about your time at Brazil and how you had people of all backgrounds and races and colors. How when you're in Chile, and correct me if I'm wrong because I could be, but I know it's a very I would say male dominant, like masculine uh, work culture down there, right?
Mhm.
How does being a foreign female in a managerial role, right? How did you I guess how do the Chileans respond to that, right? Or how does that kind of fit in, or what has your experience been with that in that culture?
Mhm. Um, That's an interesting question, John. And you're spot on with that there's not many females in managerial or ownership roles in Chile. It is a very male-driven economy. Um, there are more Venezuelans now coming into Chile over the last decade, but a decade ago it was quite a bit different. Um, I found that I was almost seen as an exotic figure in Punta Arenas. Like, they knew I was a manager, but because I'm white, because I'm not from there, I'm just so different that I was accepted
Okay.
appropriately in that role. But it is rare to find a female in a managerial type position. And
Hmm.
I found it important, especially with males, to always speak to them in the formal conjugation of the verb conjugations in Spanish. Even if we were on a friendlier level of interactions and they spoke to me with tú, which is you would with a friend, I still maintain that level of respect, saying usted to help create a formal interaction with
Okay.
who we're working with. Mhm.
Okay. So you use the language to help kind of create that uh, relationship, right, with you in a managerial role.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
Very smart.
Uh-huh.
So, uh, now one thing that we're talking about, and or the students are reading about this week, is that we're actually talking about ethics, social responsibility, and sustainability. And I know from us working together over time that there's been a couple, uh, I would say, ethical things that we discuss quite often. Do you want to kind of touch on those at all?
So the ethics of pay would be a big one. In Chile, again, being a male-dominated driven society, males are going to make more than females. And then It is an ethical question. When I go to Chile and work, what should my pay rate be? Should I be making the same wage as a Chilean, even though I'm just coming there to work? Or should I be making a wage that's comparable to what I could make in my country? Because maybe I wouldn't accept that offer if I was receiving something quite a bit lower than I could make back home, because I'm having to support different living costs than people who are living in that country do. So it is a really interesting question. I know often in Chile, people will hire based upon confidence, knowing somebody to put them into a role that pays well. So government, any type of business, rather than hiring someone who's actually fit for the role, they may hire somebody who they know well and isn't going to steal anything from them. And then they're also giving a better wage to their friends and family rather than somebody who's studied into that position. So yeah, not even just with me coming in as a foreigner working in that country, within the country, there's a whole nother question of ethics and morals, but it's normal for them and they expect it. It's a big eye opener for me when I see people who are not qualified to be in a role being paid quite a high wage just because they're
Yeah.
friends with somebody who's in charge.
Yeah. Now, what what is the minimum wage in Punta Arenas?
It's about 500 US dollars a month, which is hard to believe somebody can live off of. It's very low. And I think that's why, John, we see many of the people we know in Punta living with their extended families in the same
Hmm.
house. It's in North America. I mean, I tell my Chilean friends that when I turned 18, my mom said I had to start paying her rent or move out. And many of them can't believe that. You will see 40-year-old men who live at home with their parents in Chile if they don't have a wife to take care of them.
If they don't have a wife to take care of
Take
them?
care of them, yeah. If there
Okay.
is no wife or girlfriend in the picture, they live at home with their parents. They would not move out and live on their own. That would be seen as just a poor use of your income.
Okay. Um, yeah, because I know, when we've talked about staff wages, right, in the past, uh, being from North America and Antarctic logistics and expeditions being based out of the United States in Salt Lake City, a lot of times when we look at the wages, the question to us is, are we going to have wages that are aligned with our company structure, or
Mhm.
are we going to pay people based on the local economy,
Mhm.
right? Because you just said the minimum wage is $500 a month, uh,
Mhm.
which is, yeah. I mean, I mean, I've been through there. I've seen houses and the way people live and everything. And then we're paying people. I mean, we have some staff that are local to that area making $200 a day, right? And then I think the lowest paid person is like $120 a day, which
Mhm.
is just so much more than the minimum wage or what a lot of the people there are making.
Yeah.
So I know we've talked before about why we pay people so much, right? And then they come and work for us and feel like they're making nothing because then now they're comparing their wages to our staff that's working in Antarctica. Um,
Yeah.
and we have college, university educated people from Chile working for us, making a great wage, but they say they're getting less than a dishwasher in Antarctica, right? So I guess how do you kind of feel with that, right? Because I know you've been working alongside people, right? And you see, well, yeah, you are getting paid less than a dishwasher in Antarctica, but you're also getting paid a great wage locally, right? Like, how do you deal with kind of that ethical dilemma in your mind when you're thinking about the wages for the staff?
Thankfully, I don't have people coming to me expressing issues with that,
Okay.
but the more staff start to share their wage, and now that the wages are made public in the job postings, I think it's something we might see more of.
Hmm.
Um, I think everyone needs to look at themselves. Am I happy with this job for this wage if I didn't know what other people were making? Do I
Yeah.
enjoy what I do? And can I live off of this? Or do I value myself higher? Um, I think those are the things that each individual has to look at, um, independently of what everyone else is making. It's really just about what they're trying to get out of their lives.
Yeah, no, that's great. And
I don't
then
think paying people, sorry, John, I don't think paying people more is really going to improve the quality of work that we're getting from them. Hopefully, everyone's giving it their all to begin with and happy with their wage. I know if they're not happy with their wage, and angry with the company, it's probably time to move on.
yeah,
If
I
people
know
get
from
silent, if people get silent and they're not happy, they're not going to be able to work to their fullest potential.
yeah, I know from my perspective when you think about their local economy, they're paid amazingly, right? Like the phenomenal wages. So another I guess kind of question related to what the students are reading about this week in the textbook. We're talking about like offshoring and looking at outsourcing staff, right? So when it comes to the staff team, what are your thoughts on hiring someone local to the area versus maybe bringing someone else from North America in to work on your team versus having people from other places come in? How do you
Mhm.
kind of feel about that? Hiring locally or bringing people over to do the job.
Hmm. I think it's important to hire local. Obviously, we're trying to support the local economy as much as possible. And so we've talked about with ALE, it's much more um, financially beneficial for them to hire local. However, I do think that working in guest services, it is good for a guest to be able to relate with somebody from their culture. Um, or language even. It's they're coming to such a different place and to
Mhm.
only work with a different culture, there are struggles. So I think it's nice for the staff as well to have a mixture of both North American and South American colleagues because we're all learning from each other. It feels to me right now in the office that we're predominantly Chilean, but the office structure is North American. So we're
Yeah.
set up on more of a linear type, all working equally, but then we are just Chileans mainly working in the office. And that's changed quite a bit over the years. But I know that the Chileans always have enjoyed working in this North American bubble in Chile. So I think hiring local as much as possible, but then there probably are specific people who could fulfill a role that we can't source locally coming down to support as well.
Okay. Awesome. And then the last question that I have, which I ask everyone, is that if you could give any advice, right, to the students that are studying international management, right, when it comes to your experience with managing globally and working in different countries, what just main piece of advice, and it can be anything that you would give them?
Hmm. I think I would say never assume you know what the other person wants to, never assume you know the way that the other person wants to receive the information from you. Always try and humble yourselves because even within our own culture, we're seeing so much more diversity within Canada or the United States. And I know even within a small group of colleagues here in a small town, we might all want to take information differently. I might want to receive something very directly. Somebody else might rather the information come indirectly through a supervisor. So I think it's important to not assume that you know what the other people around you want in the workplace, especially if it's a different culture or looking at other countries and ways of doing things there's no right or wrong, and we have no idea what other people may be assuming or thinking.
Yeah.
So, mm,
Stay humble. Be careful. Okay.
yes.
So,
Yes.
um,
People are
okay.
surprising.
Yes. So awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking with my class. I've enjoyed it. I'm sure they'll enjoy listening to your perspective on your experiences. Um, and I hope you have a good time in Canada or South America this year and everything goes well.
Thank you for having me, John, and listening to my perspective.
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
Bye.